South Jamaica, baby, they made me to be the greatest. Serving the deed of my creators, fresh off of my high haters. It's the king again, Magdalene, chauffeured, bragging and boasting.
Yo, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Dollars. It's another day, another dollar video, and I'm going to be reacting to this documentary about the Russian doll man. Now, this is type crazy. Not even type crazy. This is really crazy because this guy might have been worse than Jeffrey Dahmer. This guy was a Russian serial killer that would have the bodies and mummify them to make them look like dolls all around his crib. So you could like walk into his living room and you would see a dead body that looked like a doll. Now, I remember when I used to watch The Flash show and when I used to watch Arrow, them shows got me through a hard time back in the day when they were good. I remember I used to love The Flash and Arrow. The Flash all the way up to season 5, because after that I stopped watching it. But there was a villain that he was called the Doll Maker, and he was a serial killer, and he would make his victims turn into dolls. So I'm assuming that's where they got the inspiration to make that villain from, was based on an actual real serial killer from Russia. But this is interesting and I wanted to check it out, so hopefully you guys want to check it out. And without further ado, let's hop right into this.
Throughout time, fascination with death has been an ongoing and shared subject for many. The grim, oddly fascinating part about the afterlife involves the possibility of forming some sort of connection with a lingering entity or a loved one that might have passed. Oftentimes, either to satisfy this curiosity or to cope with loss, people will attempt to contact the dead by either visiting their gravesite or, in more extreme cases, by using certain communication devices such as a Ouija board or some sort of radio.
I would advise anybody that's thinking about doing that, please don't do that. You may think you're contacting a dead relative, but you're really talking to spirits, right? And not the good ones, so please don't do that.
By this point in time, as we all know, these definitely provide heavily mixed results, depending on who you are. But what about those that take this fascination too far? Historically, we've had a few very infamous names pop up about certain people keeping dead bodies for themselves. Such was the case with Carl Tanzler, the necrophile that kept a deceased and mummified 22-year-old in his home to live with him for over 7 years. This case is crazy in and of itself, but it's been covered time and time again. Because of this, I wanted to focus on a similar, if not slightly more extreme situation that came to light a few years ago, surrounding the bizarre happenings of a Russian man by the name of Anatoly Moskvin.
The Russian doll man.
Moskvin is a 52-year-old that, back in the mid to late 2000s, was regarded a genius by many. He was a historian who authored various scientific papers and acquired the knowledge of upwards of 13 different languages. Many of his peers and family saw him as a quiet, ordinary person with no real cause for concern regarding his behavior.
Always the quiet, ones.
He had this unforgiving obsession with the afterlife, and the scientific papers and magazine publications that he would provide over the years would actually come to assist in explaining the secret and deeply outlandish behavior that he was committing right under everyone's nose. You see, Moskvin was a very disturbing character. In late 2011, he had single-handedly thrown Russian police and media into a whirlwind down one of the darkest and most bizarre criminal cases in the country's history.
Okay, so I'm assuming he was actually a serial killer, but he was just collecting the bodies from the cemeteries, which is still bad in itself, but I mean, at least he wasn't actually committing the crimes of murder and turning them into dolls, because that would have been even more darker. So my apologies for the wrong info. And this was the mid-late 2000s, so this is not too long ago.
1966, Anatoly was born in Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, to his parents by the names of Yuri Fedorovich and Elvira Alexandrovna. According to his parents, he was very socially awkward and had pretty intense difficulty making friends. On the flip side of this, he was extremely smart, and his parents
It's funny how these are always signs of somebody that could possibly be a serial killer. They're always socially awkward. They always have trouble making friends, but they smart. So if you have a child that's having issues making friends, but he's really smart and he's a little awkward, you might want to pay more attention to his computer or something, or just pay attention in general, because these are usually the ingredients of a serial killer.
Parents simply chalked up his awkwardness to his intelligence, not thinking much of it. Young Anatoly had a childhood that was far from conventional, though. According to an account by him, for example, one day in the 3rd grade, he had returned home from school completely covered in bruises. As it turns out, these were caused by a man that raped him sometime that day.
Wow.
To date, it's unclear whether he ever relayed that information to his parents or not. This was far from the first
crazy.
odd instance that played out in his youth. In fact, one could argue that what we're about to discuss was the true beginning of his obsession with a very unconventional topic: the dead. This fascination stems way back to when he was only 13. In a local weekly publication that focuses on cemeteries and obituaries, Moskvin outlines a very strange ritual that he found himself tangled up in. In the publication, dated October 26, 2011, he explains that a group of men in black suits stopped him on his way home from school. They were en route to the funeral of 11-year-old Natasha Petrova and ended up dragging young Anatoly along to her coffin, where they forced him to kiss the girl's corpse.
What?
Further on in his writing, he explains that, quote, I kissed her once, then again.
Already, this guy had a messed up childhood from being abused and then being dragged to a freaking funeral to kiss a dead body. That's messed up.
Then again. Afterwards, the girl's mother then allegedly placed a wedding ring on the 13-year-old's finger and one on the hand of her dead daughter.
Hey, yo.
My strange marriage with Natasha Petrova was useful, Moskvin claimed. Useful it was, as Moskvin's unapologetic obsession with the undead was just beginning to take root. After this, Moskvin began to have very ominous dreams about the dead girl. According to him, she would visit him nightly and would try to profess her knowledge of black magic upon him, whilst pleading for him to return to the village.
Nah, that
where
was
the
a
ritual
demon.
had taken place.
That definitely was a demon
Apparently,
visiting.
After heading back there, the visitation stopped. But this would be short-lived, as once he ceased to visit it regularly, she would once again appear in his dreams.
Yo, that is crazy.
Reporting this to his parents was ineffective at best, as they simply took him to a doctor that chalked it up to Moskvin.
Yo, parents are never useful, right? It's like you can be seeing some real shit and you try to tell them and they'll be like, oh no, we got to get them checked out. When you're actually seeing something, you know, the movies always show you this. Like the parents are never helpful, bro.
And during puberty. With this diagnosis, he also went forth to prescribe him valerian, an herbal sedative that aids in relaxation. After an entire year of visits by Natasha, she would eventually grow tired of Moskvin's refusals to do what she wanted. Since this was the case, she tasked him with performing a black magic ritual using a classmate's tooth in exchange for her leaving him alone forever. Somehow,
wild.
according to Moskvin, this ritual was carried out successfully, and as a result, she never came back.
How the hell did he get the tooth? He got a tooth from his classmate?
Task would have other implications on his life, however, as it successfully kicked off Anatoly's interest in black magic and the occult. Later on in life, Moskvin studied at the University of Moscow and earned a degree in Celtic Studies, a culture that bears a very close blend in beliefs between life and death.
I believe the Celtic and the Druids had something to do with the beginning of Halloween. Like a lot of the rituals that people do on Halloween, or like the traditions, came from the Celtic and the Druids.
So, he would go on to join the Society of the Luciferians and would embrace the left-hand path, which bears a focus on sexual magic and personal anarchy.
Hey yo, so this is deeper than just somebody that has a fascination with the dead. Like this guy was really deep into the black magic occultic practices. He joined the Luciferian Society, but it also started from as a child when he was abused by a grown-ass man, which is disgusting. And then he was dragged to a funeral and forced to marry a dead corpse. Like, so I'm not saying that this guy was an innocent person, but it's like you can see why things happen and why people go down the paths that they go down due to what they've been through.
Coupled with his interest in black magic, would result in Moskvin performing various rituals on dead animals and eventually vowing celibacy.
He did what to
After
animals?
graduation, it became known that he had grown to acquire extensive knowledge of the intricacies of all the surrounding cemeteries in his area. When sharing his knowledge throughout his various writings, he claims that he went to upwards of over 752 of them from 2005 to 2007 in his hometown for a so-called research trip.
What was he
Assisted by a
researching?
well-known historian named Oleg Ryabov, the two began their trek across the region to document cemeteries and to unearth local history along the way.
Yeah, he was pretending it was for history, but meanwhile he had his own personal reasons why he was actually researching those cemeteries.
The end goal was to publish a book by the name of Nizhny Novgorod Necropolis that contained all of his findings, but as you might have guessed, Moskvin had ulterior motives.
Exactly.
In 2009, local residents began to notice that the gravesites of their loved ones were either desecrated or dug up entirely. This eventually led to a 2-year-long investigation into these occurrences that seemed to lead nowhere at all.
You have to put some cops to watch those
In 2011,
cemeteries.
an anti-Muslim terror attack would unfold at the airport in Moscow, and very shortly afterwards, authorities caught wind of some Muslim gravesites that were allegedly being dug up and vandalized. After going to investigate that for a potential terror suspect, Moskvin would quickly jump to act like he was simply painting over some gravestones. But he was, in turn, promptly arrested, caught red-handed in the act of vandalism. Shortly afterwards, police would then launch an investigation into these bizarre acts by Moskvin, and the first place of interest to search was his living quarters.
His crib, yup.
Fully expecting Moskvin to be an extremist, they were anticipating the discovery of various anti-Muslim propaganda to litter his living quarters.
Got some nasty
What
shit
they
on
would
his
find in
nose.
reality,
The hell?
however, would leave police completely baffled. The raid,
Nasty ass
which took
wart.
place in an apartment that he actually shared with his parents, ended up leading to the discovery of 29 life-size dolls.
Wow. His parents didn't see nothing weird? Like,
Russian police have released this video they shot in what can be described as a house of horrors. They say those aren't dolls strewn about the apartment, but actual remains of people a historian had dug up and dressed in women's clothing and then put on display.
crazy.
The figures, heavily representing antique dolls, wore various types of clothing. Apparently, Moskvin dressed all of these up in makeup, even going as far as to place buttons or various circular objects in their eye sockets to give them a more lifelike appearance. The thing is though, these weren't simply dolls. Rather,
Human
these were all
remains?
created with the dead corpses of girls ranging in age from 3 to just 12 years old.
Whoa.
Even more disturbing, when police began to move the bodies in this investigation, most of them would emit some sort of jingle, and it was later revealed that Moskvin stuffed each of the rib cages with music boxes so they could emit some sort of audible feedback.
Bro, this guy was crazy. He literally put music boxes inside the corpses of little girls. My whole thing is, how were they able to be preserved? Like, how old were these corpses that they weren't just bones yet? Like, I don't know. That's just creepy.
When he interacted with them. Moskvin also allegedly
Can't believe
kept
this
track
really
of their
happened.
birthdays in his room and celebrated them when the time came.
He
According
had
to
birthday
police,
parties?
There were photographs and plaques taken off of gravestones, doll-making manuals, and maps of local cemeteries littering the apartment. Furthermore, the clothes that most of these dolls were wearing were the actual clothes in which they were buried.
Wow.
Moskvin later admitted that he achieved structural integrity of the corpses by wrapping their legs and arms with rags before stuffing those into nylon tights. He performed this for each of their limbs and their faces before inserting buttons into their eye sockets as to, quote, allow them to watch cartoons with him. In police interrogations that followed, he claimed that he loved most of them. However, there were a few that he simply wasn't content with. The ones that he had grown to dislike were promptly stuffed into their small garage and left to be forgotten. Apparently, he did
I'm
all this out
surprised
of
they didn't make
loneliness.
like a movie about
His
this, so they
parents claimed
probably
that he'd
did.
grown this massive obsession with creating life-size dolls, and bizarrely didn't think much of it, regardless of the smell that it would emit.
Hey, yo.
We saw these dolls, but we did not suspect there were dead bodies inside. We thought it was his hobby to make such big dolls, and we didn't
Oh, wait a minute. Your grown-ass son all of a sudden has a fascination with dolls, life-size dolls at that, and they're emitting a smell, and you don't see nothing weird about that? Like, some people just, I don't know, they be blind or they willfully just don't want to see like the red flags, because that's just crazy to me.
didn't see anything wrong with it, his mother claimed in an interview. According to a neighbor, there would be a constantly putrid smell that would emit from their apartment every time he passed by. However, he chalked it up to being a sewage problem below the building.
The smell was so powerful that neighbors could smell it while they were passing by, and yet the parents were living with the guy and didn't complain or didn't realize, like listen, bro, I don't know. In our Spanish households, bro, as soon as you smell something, people's like, yo, what is that? Like, we're investigators. We're trying to find what's the source of that smell. Like, no way that's going to continue to linger and we don't figure it out. But for the fact that that happened for so long and his parents didn't catch on, to me, that's just ridiculous.
Not thinking much of it.
Ridiculous,
Out of all the corpses that he kept locked up in his apartment, there was one of them that was with him for upwards of 9 years.
His favorite.
With all of these findings by police, Moskvin was eventually charged with extremely heavy crimes.
Necrophilia?
In late 2011, with new nicknames given by the media, such as Lord of the Mummies and the Puppeteer, Moskvin eventually confessed to 44 counts of grave abuse and was sentenced to a psychiatric ward shortly afterwards.
Hey, yo.
There, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and has been in confinement ever since. It's been reported that Moskvin was repeatedly beaten by guards at this facility, and according to his mother, was also fed up to 15 pills per day, which kept him in a catatonic state. Since this was the case, a human rights lawyer by the name of Violeta Volkova was hired to represent Moskvin.
Don't tell me they got him
To
out.
get him out of this facility and into an independent clinic in Moscow for re-examination, expressing a primary distrust in the ward's doctors. This grueling legal fight ended up earning him a second hearing, and as of
Listen, one thing I don't like when people of power abuse their power, and a lot of them psychiatric centers in those places, they always abusing their patients. Like, I never liked that type of stuff. Regardless, like, he literally did have an issue. I know it was extreme, the stuff he was doing, but I thought it would have been worse if he was a serial killer. Like, desecrating graves and corpses, yes, that's sick. But it's not as sick if he was actually killing these females and then doing that, because that would have been a whole nother level. But it's like, when you're in a position of power and you're abusing patients, bro, like, that's just, I never liked that. Never. In any form of abuse of power, to me, is just, I hate it. But especially when you got patients that are actually have problems, and you're not doing your job to, treat them, to me, I don't like that.
of September of 2018, he was offered the opportunity to continue his psychiatric treatment at home, and alongside this, the ability to essentially walk free.
I don't know about letting him
As you
free,
might
though.
expect, though, this decision has been met with pretty heavy controversy.
Yeah, that's too much. You could keep him in a facility, just put him in a good one. Hey, yo. I brought them home and warmed them up. That's crazy.
One of the victim's mothers, a woman by the name of Natalia Chardamova, didn't realize that this entire time she was visiting an empty coffin when going to her daughter's gravesite. The corpse of her daughter, Olga, was one of the 29 girls that he dug up.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's kind of messed up if he didn't identify the corpses, because now you got so many corpses and bodies, like 29 of them, you could mix them up. And he was so crazy, he probably did have it organized where he knew what corpse was who. So that would have been messed up if the families never retrieved the corpses and knew who was who.
And kept locked up in his home. Apparently,
That's
she
so
had been
sad,
brutally
though.
murdered at age 10, and it's completely tragic to think about what this mother could have gone through during that. Coming to the realization that her daughter was taken from her not only once, but a second time infuriates her, and she's one of the very many that unapologetically oppose the potential release of him.
I don't blame her, man. I don't blame anybody that feels that
He needs to
way.
be kept under surveillance. This creature brought fear, terror, and panic into my life. Anatoly Moskvin is set to walk free from his psychiatric ward sometime this year. The order of his containment with the facility was set to expire last December, so his release comes in only a matter of time. While he might walk as a quote-unquote free man, his crimes will forever go down as some of the darkest and most bizarre in history. The emotions that these parents are going through is completely inconceivable, and we can only hope that authorities keep a close eye on him for the remainder of his life, as he could very easily still possess the inner drive to continue with his disturbing antics.
The fact that this man is actually walking free, to me, is crazy. but I don't feel like
Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
I don't feel like he's scot-free. I feel like there's some type of people keeping a watchful eye on him. You know, you got these people that are not even law enforcement that they know about the story that is keeping tabs. Like anytime, that's like when there's offenders that live near you and you know that there's an offender near you, there's people that's watching out for that person. So I don't think that he's just walking free without some type of surveillance, whether it's civilian or law enforcement. Somebody's watching him. But yeah, the fact that this guy is free right now to me is bugged out. But again, I was assuming this guy was a serial killer. He wasn't, you know, because if he would have been a serial killer and he did this, I would assume this guy was worse than Jeffrey Dahmer, right? But yeah, man, this was an interesting video. I'm going to do a lot of different types of videos like this. So if you guys enjoy this, just feel free to leave a like and a comment. And you can recommend me some stories you want me to cover as well. Anyway, man, it's your boy Dollars. I'm off this.
For my time goes by, they gon' raise a nigga jersey in the sky. Treat a nigga right, big dreaming on my life. Shorty wanna get some air, I go and get her when I fly. Taking off when these niggas are retired. The minute I catch fire, I smoked them all before, just revisiting the high.